This week, Hollywood and its criminally underappreciated subgenre of feature films based on lower league Scottish football lost an icon in Robert Duvall. Having struggled for exposure in upstart productions like To Kill a Mockingbird, The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, Duvall finally broke through in 2002's A Shot at Glory, where he played Gordon MacLeod, the cantankerous manager of Kilknocky FC, alongside fellow acting luminaries Michael Keaton, Brian Cox and Alistair McCoist. But it was the supporting cast that truly caught the eye of the connoisseur. With filming taking place in Crail, Rovers players including Kenny Black, Peter Heatherstone, Stevie Hamilton and Craig McEwen would head to the East Neuk after training and help to make up the Kilknocky squad. And indeed, filming was initially planned for Starks Park, but Kirkcaldy's shining modern football arena wasn't in poor enough nick to be the home of plucky Kilknocky, with Dumbarton's Boghead preferred in the end. But on Friday night past, it was one of Duvall's lesser roles that was brought to mind. With St Johnstone beginning to dominate the game and going closer to scoring than anybody else in the history of the sport, the Rovers said thank you for smoking to the Fair City Unity, whose pyro display forced a stoppage, stripped Saints of their momentum and allowed the Rovers to regroup, ultimately going on to record their 7th 0-0 draw of the season. This is the Oh No 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 podcast. My name is Duncan Cameron, and joining me to talk about it all tonight, we have Robbie Weir, first of all. How are you, Robbie?
Yeah, I'm really good, Duncan. It was quite funny to listen back to. I sometimes go back and look at key points and not content with the highlights from Rafe TV. I also want to add in the sheen of Davy Hancock's commentary, plus in this instance Grant Anderson. Quite funny. It's that incident's going off in the background with the pyro. Davy mentions it, and it's like, well, it's it might force a stoppage, and Grant Anderson's just like, looks good though. It's like just giving them their kudos. So if you were part of the Fair City Unity, you do get a bit of plaudits from one of our former players for that.
Fair enough. We've also got Greg Brown tonight as well. How are you, Greg?
Aye, grand, thank you. Just processing the frustration of the Rovers drawing as many blanks as fired on a Duvall movie set, but aye, well, we'll take it as it comes.
Fair enough. Right, listen, let's just kind of jump in, because despite the lack of goals, there is still a fair bit to cover in this one. So we'll jump in. A bit of a curveball in the starting lineup from Dougie Imrie. So somewhat unexpected starts for both Lewis Stevenson back from injury and Innes Cameron, well, I suppose also back from injury, making his debut. But also still space in the team for Jack Hamilton and Lewis Vaughan. So, Greg, what did you make of that 11, and also how it sort of initially looked to be laid out?
Yeah, so I hadn't actually, I was chasing my tail a wee bit on Friday before the game, so I hadn't caught anything on social media about the lineup. So it was as the teams were coming out on the pitch, and obviously as the game kicked off, I'm thinking, all right, okay, so we've got Cameron, we've got Hamilton, and we've got Vaughan. Easton's there. And you see it's that kind of 4-4-2, and then you're thinking, right, well, Vaughan's definitely on the right, and it was that simultaneous feeling of, this definitely feels different in a positive way. Like it's a change that very much feels tactical rather than a desperate kind of roll of a dice. But equally, you're initially going, well, Vaughan on the right. I'm not really sure how that's going to pan out. I think it was an interesting question that was posed about Hamilton and Cameron playing together. I think we've said for long enough that actually, might that work? Might Hamilton kind of be suited in a two? And I don't think what we saw on Friday is anywhere near enough a body of evidence to say one way or another. But I think what was clear very early on, for all that it objectively could have been a really, really good lineup and good approach, was that Vaughan in particular, he's just wasted on the right. I mean, a couple of years ago, maybe could have put in more of a performance there. I just think the attributes aren't quite there for the performance you're really needing from him, and I think you're asking a lot of anybody playing out in that wide right, even in terms of the defensive running. And then Vaughan's arguably the only person in the team that's that kind of chaos factor. So how much of that are you eating into by asking him to then do the defensive graft? So that was my only concern really in the first 5-10 minutes that seemed to be glaring, and thankfully it didn't seem to take Emery too long to kind of come to a similar viewpoint.
That was the thing. It was like in the opening couple of minutes, literally maybe the first 2 minutes, it looked like Vaughan and Easton were both pretty wide. Mm-hmm. And you're like, as you say, you're like, this is a 4-4-2. But then, didn't take long before they really kind of narrowed in. And I don't know whether that was just, well, first of all, just me misreading the game. If it was a case of like, well, actually, no, St Johnstone just attacked down the wings early doors and we had to go wide, or whether it was a bit of a misdirect almost. Mm-hmm. Like, start them wide, let Saints think that's what we're doing, and then actually just bring them much narrower to be much more like that sort of 4-2-2-2 that we saw against County earlier in the season. Robbie, for yourself, what did you make of that setup and the sort of opening exchanges?
I mean, I think with hindsight, you look back and you sort of say, like, it needed adjusted very quickly given the circumstances. Greg rightfully mentions about Lewis Vaughan. I agree with that in terms of you're not really going to get the best out of him out wide nowadays. I mean, probably the best season that he had in his career was the season in League One with Barry Smith when he was fully fit coming in off the left. But nowadays it's a bit of a different situation, different circumstances. Mm-hmm. Do have to give a whole load of praise though to the other Lewis Stevenson, because for coming back from such a long-term injury, he didn't miss a beat at all. No. Could have just been up and down the wing all night long, and just gradually, just good to see him back into the team, offering an alternative. I know that Ewan Wilson's not without his critics, but Stevenson, with the experience that he's got, the partnership with Hanlon, it was good to see.
Just to kind of stick to some of the kind of tactical type stuff for now, and then we'll go into this instance of the game. There's a couple of things on that. So at a certain point in the first half, I don't know if it was literally at the kind of stoppage or if it was a little bit after that, Innes, Cameron and Vaughan swapped for a period of time. And at that point, it felt like, this isn't the plan.
Aye.
Like that's very much a case of like, it's too early and I don't want to be making any substitutions, but this isn't working effectively. Which maybe you need to try these things to work it out. And I think one thing with St Johnstone is they have different ways of playing. They've got a lot of options. They've got different approaches that they can bring. I mean, even with the fullbacks that they've got, options wise, sometimes they're inverted, sometimes they're not. I'm not overly surprised that there needed to be a bit of kind of rejigging after the fact. And I suppose it's a little bit double-sided, this, because I'm really minded to actually be very praiseful. I don't know if that's a word. Complimentary, that'll do. Thanks, Robbie.
I think that's the word,
Deary me. It's been a long day. I'm inclined to be very complimentary towards Doug Emery for starting the way that he did in terms of effectively playing three strikers. They weren't all in striking roles, but that's brave. And, Blair and I quite literally had a go at him for talking about players not being brave enough, but him not making brave decisions last Sunday. And that's brave. Like that's absolutely what that is. Playing Hamilton and Cameron and Vaughan is brave. To a degree, as I say, I think, though, also it kind of limited the options for changing it. There's only so many ways that you can go, and you're starting with someone out of position. So you can only really... It's like one of those little puzzles where it's like 8 tiles in a 9-tile space. All you can do by rejigging it is move others out of place to get one back in. But for all that, I mean, I think it's very difficult to criticise over the piece. There was also a suggestion of, if you play all your strikers, who do you put on in the second half if you're not winning the game yet? But as I say, I think it's an approach that is braver than that. It's, well, I'm just going to play all my strikers at the beginning, see how we get on. Hopefully we're 3.5 and it doesn't matter.
I don't know if you had a listen to Simo Valacari's post-match interview, but he effectively calls out Imre for it. He says he looked at what happened last weekend and what happened when we played Ayr, and he thought, well, just going to play two big lads up front and just batter them about. And they put up a good fight. I've got to say that about Hamilton and Cameron. When I know Cameron's more out wide, but Hamilton still had a hell of a shift. And for I remember doing the post-match with you, Duncan, about the first game at Starks, where we were talking about Diabiate and just how he looked comfortably above anything at this level. Just on Friday, he looked like his confidence has been absolutely wasted.
Yeah.
Like, he just very out of sorts.
So this is the other thing I think is interesting about the kind of tactical setup for this game from a Rovers perspective. And it ties into Diabate and where his confidence might have gone. So for the last couple of weeks, he's been playing at right back.
Yeah.
And Dougie Imrie, in a very kind of candid manner in his pre-match in the paper, said that he looked like a fish out of water there, which I don't think anybody disagrees with. I think all the St Johnstone fans have been saying exactly the same thing. It's just interesting to hear an opposition manager say it. But I think this plays into some of how we set up, because, and it was more apparent on the left-hand side, we effectively just let their fullbacks have the ball. And it was clearly very deliberate. Like, Greg, if you pointed this out to me at the game, there's a point not too long before half-time where Liam Smith, the right-back, is in acres of space and the ball goes out to him. And Stevenson starts to go, and then his teammates, Hanlon and O'Connor, are both saying to him, like, effectively what they're saying to him is like, no, remember the plan. Like, stay tight, stay narrow. And effectively we're just going to let him have the ball. And I think the plan was the same on the other side, but it's less apparent because they're playing the boy Forrester at left back, and he's right-footed, so he's not really getting even into the positions. But I think it was a kind of calculated risk. And I think it was partly Dougie Imrie going, there's a reasonable chance, probably won't be, there's a reasonable chance that might be Diabate at right back, where he looks very uncomfortable, or it's going to be Liam Smith, who's been in and out the team, hasn't particularly been impressing, or it's going to be Regan Tumley, who hasn't played in months, which is probably the least likely. And I think that was just part, because you get the usual, the kind of grumbles when anytime an opposition player has too much time and too much space. But I say it was very clear. It wasn't like the plan was failing and Liam Smith was getting loads of time on the ball. It was like, no, actually, we are just going to stay narrow and defend narrow. Yeah. And if that means the fullback gets the ball, that's fine. That's effectively just that's factored in.
It's always going to get judged on what happens after the game. But I think if you're looking holistically at the game overall, then Smith did very, very little in terms of when he actually got on the ball. And then the second half, you saw more sort of balls flying past him or touched it out of play. And I think that's the sort of thing that makes a good or a bad game in that sort of circumstances for him. Because you might sit there and say he's had a really good game, he's found loads of space, but also as well, how much of that's by design?
Yeah. I was going to say, can you imagine the grumbling if it had been Wilson at left back though? And I genuinely don't mean that as a criticism of Wilson as such, but more his lack of that tactical discipline that actually I think Smith committing to being there probably pulls Wilson out more so. Whereas it seemed to me very obvious at the time, which almost made it more frustrating that there were so many people grumbling at Stevenson, that it was very obvious to me that Hanlon in particular was telling Stevenson to come in, and more often than not it was Stanton he was then picking up. And if you've got Stevenson, or in fact, because we'll stick with that rather than the hypothetical of Wilson, but if Stevenson goes out to go to Smith, I'm not really sure I fancy Sam Stanton just having an acre of space around him, given what we know he can do anyway. So I think you're right. It was a measured sort of risk, but it'd be in a parallel universe. I think it'd be interesting, if not horrifying, to see what would have happened were it not Stevenson back and in the starting lineup.
This is it. It's if you've got a choice between going to try and shut down a cross from Liam Smith, he's not a bad player by any means at all, or congesting an area that you know is going to have Gullen, Fotheringham, Stanton, Fowl. Like, actually, I'd rather be closer to these other guys, really. And if he's then, again, as you say, if this happens, if it's 2 minutes to half time, the ball goes out to Liam Smith, and he sticks up in acres of space, and he sticks a pinpoint cross right on Josh Fowler's head, then we are sitting here now going tonto about not getting out and shutting down crosses.
Yeah.
But that's the risk you take. And that, as I say, I think, with the benefit of hindsight, over the 90 minutes, I think you have to say that the manager gets a tick in the box for that. And the likes of Stevenson get it for defending or carrying out that plan as well.
Every goal that Fowler scored against us this season has been him in the feet and then sort of used his movement to get the ball away from him and eventually get it in the net. So, it's a tactic that's obviously worked in terms of the defensive side because we came away with a clean sheet.
Mm-hmm. And obviously the defence has been excellent all season, and it's trying to do something in the other half that's been the bigger issue. But we have a bit of a chat about the funny bit.
Yes.
Will we do this then?
Yes, please.
So with smoke drifting across the landscape like all quiet on the Western Front, St Johnstone are marching up the park. It's a really decent move, actually, to be fair to them, before it all goes horribly, horribly wrong. Josh Fowler then manages to hit the bar from underneath the bar, and Sam Stanton can only rattle him right in his boat with a rebound. Robbie, is this the funniest miss you can remember?
Yeah, it's absolutely hysterical. You would have put your life on it, score him, but oh my word, couldn't it have happened better? And I know that it got picked up on like BBC Scotland, and you look along like Discords or you look along like Pine Bovril, and everyone's saying, well, I want Stanton to score now to see the Rovers fans going absolutely tonto. And it didn't happen. It was great. It was absolutely hysterically funny. The build-up itself was really, really good play from St Johnstone. They moved the ball about tremendously well. They found the space. Bit of luck with the deflection from when it sort of leaves Gullen, bounces up and kind of comes away from Ray. And then the initial shot from Fowler, it's one where as well, Josh Ray, like, to give him his credit, like, Fowler's kind of had to try and smash it, but Ray's almost getting to it. I don't know if he gets a touch onto it.
I think he does.
Yeah.
So I slowed this down.
John Connolly didn't chase
speed.
me down. He's going to batter me.
So I think Josh Ray touches it before Fowler does. Like a split second before. The reason why it leaves Fowler's foot and goes straight up is because Ray is basically just lifting it very, very slightly. So actually, I think Josh Ray deserves a huge amount of credit for that, because, as I say, first couple of times I was like, I don't think he's actually got it. I think this is just a comedy miss, both times. But actually, no, the first one I think Josh Ray deserves a lot of credit for.
And yeah, there's then the big discussion about whether Fowler makes it offside as well. So kind of the linesman's sort of redeemed himself by, clearly it wasn't a goal. Like, we could see blatantly it was never crossing the line, thanks to Josh and his efforts there. But yeah, just honestly, you couldn't, given the circumstances of how he left the club and the situation of, like, we saw the end to his time, and obviously I know that there's been a lot made about what happened behind the scenes, but for it to be him in front of the South Stand, basically an open goal, and yet it doesn't end up in the back of the net. Oh my God, it's like, just, you couldn't have, like, I could go and see 1,000 comedy shows 24/7 over the next year. Nothing will amuse me more than that.
It's like, I get this wrong every time. Bobby Williamson, so if you want entertainment, go to the pictures. You're not getting that in the pictures.
No, Bobby.
no, that's, as you say, like, it's pure narrative. That's the thing, and the standard narrative would have been that he scores. That's so much better that he doesn't score. That's so much better. That's what everybody wants, surely.
It's the fact that it's like you see it's getting picked up and you know it's bad because, and this has happened to us before multiple times over the last few years. You know it's bad when it starts going viral in other countries and you see like a big wall of text in French or Portuguese or Spanish, and it's just like D2 Scotland or Acos or etc. Yeah, just incredibly funny. Incredibly funny.
Yeah, Greg, your reaction to this entire debacle?
Oh, I mean, at the time, it was very much my aching sides. Like the and to the point that I couldn't even bring myself to like verbally mock Stanton. I was so caught up in the sort of momentary
that makes one of us, by the way,
elation of what had happened. But no, it just. I mean, at the time, I certainly didn't clock or pick up on Ray's sort of contribution, and I think you're absolutely right that's significant. And like without being a killjoy, what I will say on a serious note, though, and you mentioned it at the time, but Stanton's role in being the link player in that build up to that, we've not got that. We've not had that since he left, and that's actually less about Stanton being like this sort of idol that we've no longer got, and actually just we've not got a player like that. And there are players, plural, that exist like that, but we don't have somebody who's going to kind of take the ball, turn, pass the ball forward, and move forward. And that's the difference quite often in transitions of play, just like that, where you can create chances in 5 seconds of real time. And actually, I think that's what we've kind of all missed since he left. But all that aside, I get it right up him.
I'm happy to that. I kind of lost the run of myself for a few seconds there. It's just like.
Am I remembering rightly that you? And I'm quite happy to.
2 seconds. I just to get my bleep button. If you're going to quote me from there.
No. I'm not going to quote you as such. It was more than. It was. Am I remembering rightly that you lost the run of yourself so much that you mimicked his own celebration back at him?
No, I think you're misremembering a different gesture.
Oh.
Which. I do not recall to that at this time.
a very political response. I think we'll let that speak for itself.
I did enjoy the fact that one person just started chatting about him being a wanker up the back, and then that just the ripple effect of it just gradually spreading among the stand.
So my general disposition with anything like that is like. I spoke about this with Tony Watt at Firhill earlier in the season, and it was like, stop booing him. He's going to score.
Yes.
Again, to talk about like narrative, tempting fate, it's all this kind of stuff. If up until that point he could have just been met with deathly silence, that would have suited me so much better. But I think to be honest, it's the kidology of like spinning away with your arms in the air.
Aye.
Which, like, of course he's doing that. That's what you would want anybody to do. Like, it's that kind of body language thing of like, if I can just sell this hard enough, like
Stephen Dobbie used to be bad for that. He had 2 incidents, one which ultimately put us down. It was the free kick against Queen of the South, where it was at Starks in front of the South stand, where the ball like never crossed the line, but just because he ran off celebrating, he gave it a goal. Nobody could verify that it was actually a goal. And then also he had one, I think it might have been Morton, where he took a shot from the halfway line. It came off the post and then the keeper tipped it away. It might have been Derek Gaston actually, where it got tipped away. And he's off running, celebrating with his teammates, and the Morton players are still playing on. Like, it's just this convincing of like...
What I like about this is, as I say, Stanton has the presence of mind to do that. Where he's like, actually, he's probably no idea if it's in or not, but he knows enough to just act as if it is and worry about it later. So he just wheels away with his arms in the air. Josh Fowler, who has the mitigation of having just been scudded right in the dish, it takes him a couple of seconds because he's like, ow, all right enough, and then does the same thing. You're like, you've missed the boat on that, pal. I'm really sorry, but
there's definitely a few seconds where I'm not convinced Fowler could tell you with clarity how he got to Kirkcaldy that night. Yeah. Which also, like, knowing that he was in fine, very, very humorous to just see the ball rifle off his dish at pace, and that kind of, it's like a proper second of real time for him to process what's happened, and then it's just like a Bairn where he is just like, and then it's the whole like, oh wait, actually, we need to claim for a goal here.
It's like trying to work out which entry to pull from like the library of footballers' body language. It's like, oh, I've been hitting the face in the box. Oh no, wait, no, that was the ball from my teammate. Oh, a goal! Like, just and his Rolodex for how to react to it.
Another one to add to the Danny Baker style DVD from circa early 2000s, late 90s of.
Oh, very, very good. Very briefly as well, I'm not going to go and kind of go through it step by step, but I think having sort of walked it through earlier on, he is offside. I think that's the simplest explanation for this, is quite simply just that the linesman just gets it wrong, which I think is understandable. There's a lot going on, and I would rather the linesman was worried about whether the ball was in the goal or not. That's his main job, and the fact he's got that right is fine. As I say, it should actually then flag for the offside, but there's a lot going on there. So, as I say, I think that's the simplest explanation is that, yes, Fowler is offside, but the linesman has just missed it, which is...
And it also pretty conveniently segues us into like our next 3 quarters of this game, which is just going to be talking about the officials being fucking atrocious.
Yeah.
It does take us to another linesman and another offside. Well, actually, no, sorry, just before that, I wanted to ask this quick point on this. I kind of alluded to it in the intro. Greg, the fact that the play did stop then, because of, an inordinate amount of smoke from pyro from the other end. Do you think that had an effect on the game? Or is that just the kind of thing that, people like to say, but ultimately probably doesn't have that much of an effect?
No, I think it did. I genuinely think it did. St Johnstone were definitely in a wee kind of spell of ascendancy, and I think the fact that, and actually I think perversely, because the smoke was up like their end of the pitch for long enough, they were able to keep playing, and then I think that was more acutely felt when the play did then come to a halt. It was that frustration for them because we're down there, we're at their end. Had it been we just had a corner and their keeper couldn't see him, but it wasn't like that. So no, I genuinely think it did kind of cut them short in their tracks. And then I think that gave Emery the opportunity to get the players over and then be saying, this isn't working, we need to change this, we need to change that. And Valakari was as well. Which obviously has then an impact for both sides going into the game. But no, for me, 100%, it's not just a cliche there. I think that was fortuitous for us, certainly.
It's always going to be the case that the manager whose team is on top can only really say, keep doing what you're doing, whereas the other manager has the chance to react and do something different, which is, as you say, is what Emery did. But yes, sorry, that then takes us to the kind of the other talking point, or the other bit of controversy in the first half. So it's a Rovers corner. Jack Hamilton then does just brilliantly, actually, to kind of keep this alive and stab it across to Lewis Vaughan. He sticks it past the keeper, but the flag goes up. Robbie, with the benefit of the replays and particularly the freeze frame from Wraith TV, quite happy to comprehensively declare Lewis Vaughan onside here.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the linesman's only going to see one take of it, so fair on that point. Like it's a difficult point because you've got Darragh O'Connor sort of flirting on the other side of the sort of 6-yard box, just kicking about, trying to get, but he's not interfering with play, O'Connor, so that you're like, okay, well he's fine, but then you've got Vaughan behind him who's just managed to sort of edge away. Really good finish. Really would have been nice to see him sort of comeback kid getting a goal at Starks, wouldn't it? But yeah, just I think that Lewis Vaughan's exceptionally good in terms of we've not really got anyone else who can find the spaces like that. And we've seen it before numerous times. Just unfortunate. And I think if we get that goal, then it kind of, our tails are up and puts us in a position where the fans are going to be very much on side. And we're looking at potentially holding out for a 1-0 win, even though we've got a lot of the game to go. yeah, just disappointing. But again, you can't be too harsh on the officials. There was a lot more egregious decisions, I would say, later on that were far less. I don't know how to say, in terms of, I don't know, up for debate, I feel.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on this. I think if, like, I hate it when other people say this, but just for the purposes of the argument, it's one of these where it's like, if you had VAR, right, that goal will be given.
Yeah.
Because Vaughan, from a purely technical standpoint, is onside. As you say, Darragh O'Connor is not interfering with play, so you probably have to wait about 24 minutes for people to arse about with that. But ultimately, I think you reach the point where they go, yep, that's a legitimate goal, and they give it. As it is, I'm the same as you. I find it very difficult to get too kind of het up about that, because although Darragh O'Connor's not interfering with play in a technical standpoint, he is between Vaughan and the linesman.
Mm-hmm.
So as the linesman's looking at that, he's got a red jersey that's in the road, and also, what you don't get from the freeze frame is that Vaughan is sort of spinning towards the goal and the defender is stepping out. So yeah, in the freeze frame, he's in line. An eighth of a second after that, he's now beyond. And it's difficult for the linesman for that. So, and this is one of these, I will rail against VAR until I'm blue in the face. And sometimes people will come back and they'll go, oh, but what about this? What about that? I'm quite happy. I would rather not get that goal and not have to wait 8 minutes.
Aye.
For, whatever else. It was the same when we were up at Airdrie and they took away the early doors. And there was a VAR check. And it's like, I do not care. There was, I watched that goal go in. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to complain about it. And it's same with that one. But it's like, was he onside? Was he offside? I don't know. I'm too far away. I'm at the wrong angle. I'm happy to take the linesman's word for it and get on with my life. Greg, anything you want to add on that particular incident?
Nah, just I suppose beyond the fact that, with hindsight, he's obviously onside. My frustration at the time was more centred around it was a very, very quick flag, but actually on balance, like you say, in the moment, like delaying it for a second is only going to kind of lead to confirmation bias that actually he looks even more offside. So, he gave offside. It's one of these ones that's frustrating. But woulda, coulda, shoulda.
That's it. There's still time for another big chance before half time, though. This one, I guess, a kind of ball over the top that Jack Hamilton gets onto. He can't sort of get himself in on goal, but he does well to keep possession. Knocks it back for Lewis Stevenson. His cutback's very clever. Finds Scott Brown rather than just kind of jamming it into the box. Brown's shot from about 20 yards is parried by Toby Stewart, and he then, even since I wrote my notes, I've changed my mind on exactly what happens here. What I've written is that he takes the rebound sort of off Lewis Vaughan's toes. After the game, Dougie, I'm fairly critical of Lewis Vaughan here, saying he should have just kind of put everything into the net. Greg, do you think that's fair?
It's one of these ones that I can see where Emery's coming from, and I think watching it back more so. At the time, I thought it was just that my Stewart had taken it off on, and it was just frustrating. I don't know if it's just one of these things as well that it's. I don't know how much of a factor it would be, but this kind of niggling thing in the back of your mind about if you go ploughing into a keeper who's kind of sprawled there, he's literally at your mercy in terms of like the potential repercussions of that. And I don't know if that kind of goes through a professional's mind that like it's half a chance. Is it worth it? And again, it's one of these ones that it depends on really what mood you're in and how you take it. I think I was surprised to hear Emery be quite so candid in his criticism. So I don't think it's a blatant sort of cock up from Vaughan at all. But I do think on balance he possibly could have been a bit more forceful with the effort.
Robbie, I think the crux of my indecision on this, I suppose, does Lewis Vaughan actually touch the ball here? Does Stewart gather it again before Vaughan gets there? Or does Vaughan get there and then Stewart is effectively saving it for a second time? What do you think?
I think the sort of position that it ends up in, it's like Stewart does really well because he's very brave for it. You've got to give him the credit for sort of like I know it's to go full Roy Keane on it, his job, but like still has to put himself into danger there. And I'd say that it probably favoured Stewart more than Vaughan, the sort of distance to the ball and where it's at. And I think that, I don't know if he does get a touch, because I think if he had got a touch, I think he would have absolutely been wellied it past Stewart. I don't think Stewart would have had too much of an opportunity. What were your sort of thoughts regarding it?
Honestly, don't know. Like, I keep watching it, and it's almost like it doesn't make sense as I watch it in front of me, because as the ball kind of pops up, Stewart almost puts his arms out in front of Lewis Vaughan, and then it's like a frame jump. It's like it skips, and he's suddenly at the ball almost under him and in his arms. I'm like, how have you managed that? And I say, I don't know if it's because he basically grabs it before Vaughan gets there, or if it's almost like the shape of his arms means that Vaughan almost like stabs the ball into him, and it almost like it's just kind of folding into his arms as much as he's gathering it. But I think the goalkeeper deserves all the credit, really. If Vaughan, I don't even know if he's got the right kind of momentum to be able to just sort of dive into it and as Emery says, put it all into the net. And if he does, if he's too forceful, do you end up having the foul given against you anyway?
Aye.
It's such short. I think it's not unlike Stanton's ridiculous mess up the other end. But actually, I don't think he's done anything wrong necessarily. I think what he's done is very funny. I don't think he's done anything wrong, because it's almost like it's the only thing he can do. When that ball comes back off the bar and he's 1 yard away from it, all he can do is bring his left foot up, and then it happens to hit Josh Fowler in the face. With this, I feel kind of the same. I feel like Vaughan has done basically the only thing he can do, which is just try and get there and see where it goes. So, I'm not overly inclined to, start ladling criticism on top of him, put it that way. So a fairly eventful first half, I suppose. Not necessarily huge amounts of football, but it was, as far as 0-0s go, it was kind of bordering on, maybe not quite enthralling, but it was finely poised. But if that was the first half, the second half wasn't, basically. In the very first minute, though, we do have another opportunity to talk about the referee, which we love to do. It's a ball over the top again. I think it's a clearance as much as anything, I think, from Scott Brown, if I remember rightly. Jack Hamilton running into the left channel, takes Czech Diabate with him, and then there's a little bit of grappling, maybe you want to call it that, and Jack Hamilton ends up on the ground. I ended up my feet, tell you that much. And the referee waves play on. Robbie, as you said, this one necessitates going back to the full match replay. Didn't make it into the Raith TV highlights, which surprised me. But I know you went back because you also clipped it and put it on Twitter. So what are your overriding thoughts on this one, please?
Yeah, it's a horror show from the referee. I don't know with the way that the game is and goal scoring opportunities. Jack Hamilton's kind of getting the ball, but if he gets to the other side, but he's kind of going away from goal. So I don't think you would probably term it as a goal scoring opportunity. But Diabate is basically, he is really very much the last man there. But I think Hamilton had sized him up throughout the game and sort of said, basically, are you looking for a fight? Are you looking for action, effectively? Just kind of, are you wanting a war in terms of, I'm going to go toe-to-toe with you and absolutely batter you about? And I've seen arguments that Jack Hamilton had a hold of him before, but he gets wrestled to the ground and effectively pinned down to use to get back up from Diaby. There's no chance that could be anything other than a free kick for Rovers at a booking if we're talking about it. I thought it was an absolutely atrocious decision. Ross Hardy, I think that's going to be one where, you know how sometimes referees have decisions where you look back, and I know that we've had it before, but we've got numerous ones with Crawford Allen because it felt like we could never beat Cali Vissel with some of the stuff that was going on with him. You look back at some of them and you think, yeah, right, I remember you from this game. That's going to be it for him. Like, I think it's going to be this. I remember when we didn't get that free kick, when Jack Hamilton was basically past the last man, got wrestled to the ground, and we didn't get a free kick for it. I don't really know what else to term it because it was that bad. There's no sort of justification for like the defence, I would say, in terms of the Saints side.
Yeah. So I was looking to get the kind of alternative view on this, and there seems to be the case for the opposition is like, Hamilton has a bit of a grab at him first. Mm-hmm. And like, maybe he does. I'm not actually sold even on that point. But when you watch it back, just when you see the body shape of both of them as they go, Hamilton actually almost goes beyond the ball a little bit. He sort of nods it down.
Yep.
Which he's keeping it away from Diabate, which I think is the key thing. But he's gone a little bit beyond it. So he's coming back around. And at that point, that's when Diabate very clearly, from my point of view, then actually brings him down. It's like he's almost gone the long way round Diabate. And as he comes round the back, Diabate's, because he's been turned, just puts the hands on him and brings him down. And I'd say I think it's one of these that the more you slow it down and the more you zoom it in, the less you actually get a feel for what happened. It's watching it on the wide view or live in real life. I think you get the truest representation of that, which is quite simply that Jack Hamilton is about to run away from Czech Diabate and he brings him down.
As well, I mean, like, when was the last time you saw a foul? Like, in this situation, the ball comes out the other side and he runs away with it. And if the argument for the defence is, oh, well, Jack Hamilton had a hold of him, that doesn't give you free rein to effectively, like, hold him down and run away. It's a complete nonsense argument.
So it's like, I was already prepared to be angry about there not being a red card.
Yeah.
Like, I'd already gone, like, well, it's definitely a foul, so I'm preloading my... annoyance and indignation at the fact that I was doing all the arguments in my head already about denial of a goal scoring opportunity and all this precedent that's been set in the Premier Division the last couple of weeks. And I was like, hang on a second, the game's still going on. Greg, give me your thoughts on this, please.
It's incredible. At the time, and I haven't seen anything since to change my mind. I definitely think Hamilton does get round him and very much is in control of the ball. And I thought as much at the time. Like I'd have been raging had it just been a free kick and a booking. So, like by the letter of the law, had the foul been given, it probably is one of these things where it would only have been a booking, and it's fan hyperbole to latch onto that. But also in a wider sense, very frustrating because when we actually forced Diabate to do a bit of defending, he was in a big bit of bother. And the frustration is we did not ask Diabate, or in fact, many of the St Johnstone defence, to actually front up and defend all night. I think it's one thing going up and maybe winning headers against them, but there was in the second half especially, a real absence of football in the sense of running at defenders and making them decide what they're going to do, how they're going to try and get around you. And actually, like that, especially like the more I'm even thinking about it now, it's really galling because, proverbially speaking, like Diabate's on the ropes there. I think he's like Hamilton's got his number in that moment, but there's no capitalising on that in the minutes and the half to come. So in isolation, for me, it's absolutely a foul, and at the very least a booking. But for me, actually the bigger grievance that I've taken away from the game is that's what happened when in that moment we forced Diabate to try and defend. We just didn't do that enough.
Just to come in on that point, like, I don't know what the the training process is like for referees, but if it was like a theory test for a driving license, basically, and you chucked them through that, and you were like, right, find the situations that you would give in bookings, and you showed out all the ones that there was that evening of Diabate against Jack Hamilton, and you're like, who gets the booking? Well, Jack Hamilton does, of course, because he reacts. It's
he was
complete nonsense.
Hamilton was booked for reacting in the first half.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing with that, he doesn't go daft because he knows he's on a booking. And again, I think that this is why I was so ready to have a big argument about denial of a goal scoring opportunity. Because I think the referees have such a difficult job because there is so much varying degrees of refereeing. So you referee live during the game, and then if you're doing Premiership games, it then gets refereed 40 seconds later by a guy watching on a screen.
Yeah.
And then it gets refereed the Wednesday following that by Willie Collum on YouTube. And you're like, well, hang on a second, what am I supposed to be doing here? Like, where, which of these is the global truth here? Well, what am I supposed to be going up with? And then, how often does that then contradict with what I would generally take as like the average football fan's understanding of incidents? But then there's always two sets of average football fans. And they typically have opposing views. The thing with this for me is, I suppose, to leave this incident behind, again, I would love to have one of these just kind of very brief, candid conversations, just to say to the referee, what do you think happened there? Because it can only really be one of three things. Either he thinks Hamilton's made too much of it and effectively has exaggerated whatever contact there was so much that he's now not inclined to give a foul for it. He thinks it's a 50-50 and they're both as bad as each other. Or he thinks Hamilton has fouled Diabate first, which then kind of negates the second. But my arguments to this would be, well, the first one isn't true, as far as I can see. The second one, I don't think is true either. The Diabate is much more forceful towards Hamilton and Hamilton is the other way. And if it's the third one, then he should just have given a free kick to St Johnstone.
Yeah. And
I would have found that easier to accept. The people who sit around us wouldn't have thought so. But in theory, I would have found that easier to accept. So
I get what you mean, though, because like if the foul goes the other way, like you're still raging, you're still on your feet, like going tonto in the moment, but you're like, right, and especially after when you're seeing maybe some imagery around our shirt pull, you're like, well, that's what the referee's seen, that's what he's given a foul for. But 100%, I agree with you. Like if you're saying like, so that's not a foul, go and just explain why.
That's like, exactly. That's just a 10-second. As I say, like I'm not expecting there to be like statements after games or anything. That's not what I'm saying. I mean, like, God forbid I'd ever be friends with a referee. But like, if you were his mate, to just go, Ross, what happened there? Like, why did you give that? And just to get the actual answer. But as you know, I don't actually want to speak to referees. Now, as you have both just kind of touched on there, the second half, not really overflowing with goalmouth incidents, really. We've got, that's not even a goalmouth incident. We've got that, as it happens, I think about 40 seconds into the second half. And then, really the next thing of actual note happens in stoppage time, where Morgan Boys, I think it is, knocks down a header from a free kick to Jason Holt, who kind of 6 yards out can only sort of head it straight into Josh Ray. So to take the second half as a whole, there's wee half chances in it for both teams, but there's nothing really too much. Robbie, what would you put that down to? And particularly through a Rovers lens, in the sense of the lack of creativity.
I think it's just really hard to say. Like, you can tell that the players are there's certainly the effort there. And I get that, and we were kind of talking about this before we went live. In isolation, this is a good point. It's a point at home to the league leaders, especially when you look back at the results that came through yesterday. But at the same time, you do sit and look over the piece, and I know that by no means we're not the lowest scoring team in the division, but it just feels like there is a real lack of opportunities created at points. I don't know if it's stubbornness, but when you look at the subs that we've made, like Ennis Cameron, he was never going to last the full 90, so he gets replaced by Josh Mullen. That was on the 70th minute. Ross Matthews gets replaced by J. Rowe, and that sees Jordan Doherty move into the heart of midfield. I guess on that front, you can sort of size it up as a tactical move just on the basis that both our centre midfielders have been booked. But then at this point, we start going into our shells kind of, and we go into a low block and we start seeing the attacks coming, and St Johnstone have a lot more of the ball. Rovers players maybe not getting out as much. And then we've got Scott Brown coming off for Kai Montague and Paul Niso coming on for Lewis Vaughan. So, yeah, I think the real question is why we didn't opt to bring on maybe a bit more pace, maybe try and potentially make a triple sub in that final one when we had the opportunity to, because we've got the sort of 5 subs available to use. But it did just seem strange. And then on the other side, again, St Johnstone, the players that they bring on, so an hour in, they bring on Rory Payton for Kai Fotheringham to chuck an extra body up top, and then they've got Aguiman replacing Stanton, so really good of Sima Valakari to give us a chance to say farewell to Sam Stanton at Starks Park in that instance. But then the game just went into really just Saints having loads of the ball, occasionally getting a corner kick, but not really capitalising or doing anything. I can't really recall any major chances, but for us going forward, I just think that there was a failure to gamble, and that's been sort of a point that's been mentioned across the sort of season. There wasn't any sort of willingness to be the player that takes the risk and maybe makes a mistake. There was an instance where J. Rowe gets the ball out wide, or he doesn't even get the ball. It's kind of like, I think Doherty had moved into a centre mid, and you're expecting Rowe to push forward, just get into space and try and create a bit of that. But and I don't know if you don't know if it's instruction for the players from Dougie Emery, but he sort of tucks in, and you're thinking that's the opposite of what you want to do, because you want to try and expose the space. So just with the personnel that we end on the game, I mean, I know that Niso and Montague are a bit more on the raw side, shall we say, but it just felt like it was the changes meant that we weren't really going to be able to go on and kick on during the rest of the game. I mean, admittedly, they still got the point. You've got to give them the credit. It's not an avert criticism, I would say. It's more just kind of noticing the sort of situation that we played ourselves into.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to kind of labour this point, because a lot of what I've got to say on this I said last week when Blair and I talked about Kai Montague coming on ahead of Richard Chin or Lewis Gibson. It's the same thing here. Again, the final point you made there, I think, is an important one, which is that's a good point. And again, we talked about last time, is a point away at Capel ever a bad point? Is a point at home to the league leaders who are doing very well a bad point? I'd argue it's not. But I mean, Greg, for you, because I suppose, I mean, is it slightly narrow-minded to just limit that conversation to substitutes? Played 20 minutes of the half without making any subs, and it was kind of the same.
Yeah, I think for me, I am cautious of it just being overtly critical, and because I do believe that, listen, it's a clean sheet against the league leaders, and that's not to be sniffed at. But it falls very much into a wider pattern, which is more concerning. When you've got a midfield which is all running and no football, that's a problem, and that's a problem from kickoff. That's not.
Yeah,
that's
a problem for the summer.
Yes, and it's not improved by substitutions, because Nseo and Montague. Listen, Montague may go on to have a relatively successful career, but we are not yet sure what his specialisms are. We don't know what kind of midfielder he's going to be. Is he a 6? Is he an 8? Is he a 10? He'll run about. He's young, he's fit, and listen, that sounds really belittling of him, and that's not my intention. But what we don't have, and what we desperately need, are progressive passes from the midfield, and we don't have them. So unlike Robbie, I didn't go back and watch the whole match replay, but see if I was to go back and try and count up the number of forward passes from Brown and Matthews combined, I tell you what, I wouldn't run into bother losing count.
Greg, I'm just going to interrupt you there and just say that I only went back and watched the one instant. I wasn't sadistic enough to go back and watch that full second half.
I just had to, for the reference point, had to bring you in there. But,
get clarity.
But my point being exactly that, though, that it's, and this is where I think fan frustration does come in, because I don't actually think it's a frustration of drawing 0-0 with St Johnstone. It's a frustration of what feels like, yet again, watching a team that plays the ball from side to side, side to side, side to side, back to the keeper. And actually, Ray, who I think is a top keeper at this level, I do think that. And actually, there's a lot of plaudits have to go his way for the clean sheets and so on. But his distribution of late has been abysmal at times, and that's what a lot of people were only too keen to slaughter Dabrowski for. So actually, if the progressive passes are Ray launching it somewhere, or more likely O'Connor rifling a ball forward, what's the point? What is the point? We're not going to be and we might circle back to this in a few minutes, but Emery in his post-match kind of described it as an entertaining game, and described it as Rovers having a lot of the chances and causing St Johnstone problems. I didn't really see that, and actually, and Davey at one point described it as a front foot performance. No, I didn't really see that. And so when you've got that, you've got Brown and Matthews, you've got a lot of energy. You've got and I think again, just to throw another quote up, Emery described them as dogs in midfield, and I think that's absolutely spot on. They will run about like nobody's business. But we need, even if it's just one of them, we need a footballer in there who's going, and by the way, they are both perfectly adept footballers, but whether it's tactical, whether it's they themselves, somebody needs to step up and play football and get the head up and look forward and drag the team up the park. And I go back to the point in the first half about Stanton taking the ball, turning, passing, and continuing the run on to look for the ball as an option. We do not have that. And so never mind the subs, because the only people we seem to have that could bring that in, let's say a Richard Chin, for example, who, by the way, let's be clear, is very much raw, is very much nowhere near the finished article. But he's posted missing. What on earth is going on? There's been a bit of kind of tongue-in-cheek rhetoric about it. It's been since the whole World Cup Willie incident. But has it been that? Because for what reason have we not seen him? Have we not seen Gibson? Have we not seen some roll of the dice that isn't just a like-for-like swap where we're taking off Brown, Matthews, etc., and bringing on Ncio, Montague, and playing. And by the way, Josh Mullen, I think, was the one that I was happiest to see come on, because he, I think, would have offered you something different. But generally speaking, in that heart of midfield in particular, this is where I think we do really miss Sean Byrne. And going back to my comments in the pre-match where I said I was torn about the whole concept of a new deal and stuff, I tell you what, see, and this is going to sound more harsh than I actually intend it to be, but see, based on the midfield, I'd be falling over myself to offer Byrne a new deal before I offered many of the others a new deal, purely in terms of he has a specialism and he then has something that offers you something very different to what the others do.
I think specialism is a great word for it, by the way. I think that's exactly what it is. It's that, not even doesn't necessarily need to be unique, but like specific. Kind of, you see these kind of football analysis people love doing the graphs where it's like a circle and it's the spikes for what they're good at. Our midfield, it feels like if you took the names off them, you'd have 4 or 5 that looked basically identical, and you'd have a very, very difficult time going, that's Scott Brown's, and I can tell because he's got that bit, versus, oh, that's Ross Matthews, because on the other side there's this other big spike that's there. And I think that the other guys that we've got are and like you, this sounds more critical than I mean it to be, but they're kind of just like lesser versions of that because they're younger and they're not as experienced. They're not at the same time. You wouldn't expect to have a guy Kai Montague's age who's as good as Scott Brown, or Paul Inceo's age who's as good as Ross Matthews.
Yeah.
But it is just that, again, it's the same thing. Apologies for repeating myself, but it felt like, other than Josh Mullen, the subs that we made on Friday night were just making the midfield busier.
Mm-hmm.
It was like, right, let's just get more bodies into that midfield effectively. Which, like that, as you say, the thing is Stanton with the chance that he gets, he's on the halfway line receiving a pass, and 15 seconds later he's on the goal line making an arse of himself. But he's in both places because that's what he does. Where he comes back to the halfway line to receive the pass, on the turn, plays it away to Jamie Gullen, who then runs it. Stanton is then on his bike, and he's there, and he's hell for leather, and as he's on the goal line a couple of seconds later. That's where... Sorry, Robbie, I know you're trying to come in, but I'm away now. You don't necessarily need to have that. There's not only one way to play football, but you need to be able to replicate elements of it or achieve the same thing doing it different ways. Because Richard Chin's not going to do exactly that. I don't think he's going to come as deep as that to get the ball. But what he might do is run it 30 or 40 yards. If you can get the ball to him 10 yards further into their half, and maybe he's going off towards the wing, but that's fine. You can actually then progress that ball. As you say, Sean Byrne, if he was fit and available, he wouldn't have been receiving that ball on the halfway line. He'd have come much deeper to get it, but he then might have passed it 40 or 50 yards forwards. We're not really doing any of that. But as you say, we progress the ball by getting Darrell O'Connor to hit it to Jack Hamilton. And it's Barry Robson's blueprint. And there is an element of mitigation here, which is that it's Barry Robson's squad.
Yes.
Nobody had a greater opportunity to add more variety and more specialism to the midfield than Barry Robson did for this team in the summer, and he didn't, quite frankly. And he spoke quite openly about he wanted to get the ball forward as much as possible and then battle in the final third. And that's what this squad's set up to do. But not particularly good at that, because it's not a particularly good strategy. But as you say, the problem that we've got is we haven't even sort of jerry-rigged an alternative.
Yeah.
And it's almost like by the time you get to your subs, it's almost too late. It's almost like we've had 70 minutes of battling like nothing else. And it's picking up points, singular points, but it's picking up points. But once you've got to 70 minutes at 0-0 and you can see the finish line, last week you're away from home, this week it's against the league leaders. I don't think there's many managers who at that point are then going to go, right, now let's try something different. So I can kind of understand it. But it's where there needs to be more. I think this is where we need to now see that in the next few weeks.
Just needs to be more bravery overall. I know that I sort of touched on it before, but like a lot is made of Sam Stanton in terms of his role in the team, and that's absolutely fine because it was excellent to watch for that period. I know that we were talking at the time about like build statues, he's the king, etc. See, looking back though, like if you could get a prototype for one player to come into that midfield and sort of replace one of the ones that you've got, it'd be a Brad Spencer type prototype. Because you think at the number of times that we would be playing a game, you would just see Brad Spencer come deep, drop in, pick up the ball, turn, take it out of defence.
Yeah.
Because it's side to side, and then it inevitably fight. It's like they almost know that it's going to end up like, because nobody shows for it in terms of different points. Again, love to be critical because they did make like 1,000 blocks in the game on Friday, but over the season, like I think it's very much, Greg, a recurring point, like you say. I think that it's fair to be critical of it, just because we wind up in these sort of situations where we play the ball about so much, but then we just end up with the same sort of result. So it just needs a bit more courage, and you want to see that from the players. But how that pans out and what happens next is obviously the one to keep an eye on.
And this is the thing, see, like, so you mentioned Spencer, and obviously we've talked about Stanton, and you could throw a Regan Hendry, etc., into the mix as well. Like, these are all good players, but they're by no means irreplaceable players. There are similar players that exist. The problem at the minute, at risk of that repetition of my overall point, is that they were all different players, and we don't have that. What we have is fundamentally a lot of energy and a lot of dig, but not a lot of individual approaches to the game, where actually you could say, well, for this type of game, we're going with this midfield or this midfielder because it suits the way we want to approach it. Actually, we're going, well, it's Brown and Matthews for the most part, because we're going to get a lot of running. And even when it's Docherty playing in the midfield, it's generally just a lot more running. That's what needs to shift. But again, that's probably far less to do with Friday night, and as you say, Duncan, much more to do with the summer and what needs to change in the summer.
100%.
And it's, there's no point asking an elephant to the high jump at a certain point as well. It's like, I can see it from the manager's point of view, where it's like, right, these are the midfielders I've got. So, you could go and you could ask one of these guys, right, I want you to drop back to the halfway line and receive the ball on the turn and then play a pass and then make a run. But if he's not got the kind of natural skill set to do it, it might go terribly wrong.
Yeah.
But this is where, though, again, I think it then falls on the manager to come up with a plan that then coheres around that and mitigates for it. And again, I think that the frustration is he's almost doubling down on it, rather than saying, right, well, we're going to have to do this bit, but then let's at least have... And listen, I don't want to make Richard Chin out to be Romario either. Like, I think it bears repeating that. Has he still ever started one game for us? Because he got injured after his first start at Arbroath. I can't remember if he started the game after he came back from his injury. Certainly he's at
he wouldn't
2 or
have,
3
because
maximum.
he came on for his return against Dunfermline, and I don't think he's started a game since then. No,
because he came off the bench for his World Cup rally. So he's only started one game of football for Raith Rovers. So I'm not saying that he's the saviour or whatever. Ultimately, it comes back to what we've been talking about. It's the fact that he's got a different profile. And Lewis Gibson's the same.
Yep.
It gives you something different, and his teammates know that he's got a bit of something different about him as well. And it's not just pure kind of endeavour and all that kind of stuff. And I know that the other guys don't have technical ability at all, but I think we all know the point we're making. I'm not kind of labour it any further than we already have done. But it's that, I think, as I say, is something that's what needs to get better, because we're not a bad team. Not a bad team at all. And I think there has been some... our demise has been exaggerated, put it that way.
100%.
Because every team in this division is win a game, lose a game, draw a game, lose a game, win a game, lose a game, draw. That's just the way it goes.
I find it funny, because people go on about, like, well, we've got a budget for 6th or 7th place. And that's probably roughly where we're going to be.
Well, I think, so the point I was going to make there is that, see, when all the teams are like that, style points then start to count.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yeah, you know what, all these teams are different, but actually my team plays really good football, or my team's really exciting to watch, when it's like, we're not any better than any of these other teams, and it's really turgid. Like, it counts for something. It does. Well, and it needs to be just, as I say, they didn't need to turn into Barcelona overnight, but I do think Dougie needs to show us something a little. And again, put 6 goals past Ross County, put 4 goals past Queen's Park. He's not a dud by any means at all.
No.
But it needs to be a case of a 0-0 at Capello and a 0-0 at Starks Park against St Johnstone. These are good results in context when they're followed by a couple of other good results. Because if you draw 0-0 at Capello, you draw 0-0 against St Johnstone at Starks Park, and then you lose 2 of your next 3, now you've left points on the table. Whereas you draw those 2 games 0-0 and you win 2 of your next 3, that's a good run. That's 4 out of 5 games you've not lost, at worst. So
Is it not something as well that we've, I'm sure I read on Pie and Bovril earlier, that was that 6-0 in the last 11 games or something, and then when you throw into the mix then that Queen's Park, Airdrie, Morton, etc., they're getting the odd win every second or third game. That's the difference, I think, aesthetically as well, when you then glance at the league table or you think kind of how our team's getting on. The clean sheets are great. I'd infinitely prefer that to losing games like at the last gasp. It felt like the tail of the last couple of seasons, but equally, it's that kind of that you'd just like to see some green shoots more consistently. I think of a more positive sort of blueprint.
Well, I mean, very simplistic terms, those last two games, if you'd rolled the dice in the last 10 minutes of both, and you'd won one of them 1-0 and you lost the other one 1-0, you'd be better off. You'd have 3 points instead of 2. But that's not the way the world works. You very easily roll the dice and lose them both. So, as I say, I think it's almost like a waits to be seen. Those two games are the first two games of a 10-game unbeaten run. They're really good results. The first two games of 10 games without a win, they're bad results. Just don't know yet. Right, I think we've probably strayed far enough from Friday night's game directly that we can just leave it behind. But we do still have something else to talk about, because the Rovers head to Airdrie on Wednesday night for the semi-final of the daftly named KDM Evolution Trophy. What the word evolution is doing in there, I have no idea.
But it's doing a lot of heavy lifting. That's what it's doing.
Yeah, it's nonsense, just absolute nonsense. Anyway, that's very much a sideshow to the game itself. Robbie, how much importance do you attach to this semi-final?
We won this cup under the best possible circumstances, beating Rangers, and I'm sure that Dougie Emery and the squad all know that it's in your career you're going to get very limited opportunities as a player in the lower leagues to win a trophy. So this is a good opportunity for them. But as a fan, if we get put out and we beat County at the weekend, I'm probably going to be okay with that. Not that I want us to lose or that, again, the universe doesn't work that way. But yeah, it's. I think that the priority is just making sure that we're the league is obviously your bread and butter. And if we can get through to a cup final, it's going to be a nice day out. Hopefully see us win another one of these Challenge Cups, because, let's be honest, it's been good days out when we have won them before, and we had the final that we didn't win, which was slightly less. But even with that final that we did lose, I wasn't overly upset about it. I wasn't coming away from the Falkirk Stadium and absolutely crestfallen. It doesn't enter my top 5 crestfallen after Rovers games. But yeah, I mean, it's one that I'm sure that the squad and the players and the management all want to do well in. So we'll see how Tuesday progresses. And again, it's an opportunity for them maybe to put in a bit of a statement and to sort of go up against the team, an Airdrie team who are a bit in the doldrums at the moment, who some performances, again, they played well against St Johnstone, but they still got nothing from that game against them at home. Lost narrowly to Partick Thistle at the weekend. So, see how we do.
Yeah, my desire to see the Rovers win this competition is surpassed only by my desire to not see Inverness, Ayr United or Airdrie do it. Like, I really... You know, it feels like sometimes you look at other teams and you go, Kent, I'm not really that bothered. You know, there's other teams. You're like, listen, they're probably due one. That's fine.
I do think
it funny that any of these three. This is not. I'm afraid we're going to have to win this because I can't deal with any of the other three, don't it?
Ayr in particular, it's quite funny because like they got to it in the early 90s. I think Cali have won it before in recent times. Airdrie have won it before in recent times, and obviously we've had a bit of a laugh with it, to be honest, in terms of recent times, number of times that we've won it. But Ayr haven't, and I think that their fans are at a point of like, if we go and win it. They're gradually switching from it's a Diddy Cup, I don't care about it, into it could be a nice day out with a wee chance of silverware. So, I mean, if we got to a final and we knocked out Ayr, I'm not going to lie, that would be a really enjoyable experience.
I think as well the bigger thing for me is that to be far more pragmatic. And by the way, it's Airdrie away on Wednesday night, and I think any talk of beyond that is perhaps fanciful. But I think two things can be simultaneously true. It's an absolute midden of a tournament at the minute, and a competition more at the point, and what they've done with it. But would I also quite like to take the winner's check for 150 grand? To go back to our conversation of a few minutes ago, 100%, because if that's going to allow Imrie a wee bit more flexibility in the summer for a bit of turnover, it's very very reasonable prize money, which doesn't quite make up for the fact that it's a bit of a Mickey Mouse tournament now with this league format and stuff. But I would like to see us make at least the final. But again, purely, I'm thinking of that 100 grand. I'd like to see us win it, but again, driven by that 150 grand.
And Greg, to what extent do you think Dougie Imrie will make changes for this one?
It's hard to say, really. I think with one eye on Saturday, and the fact that it feels like, despite our away form at the minute, playing Ross County feels like it should be a very winnable game, but you want to, obviously, you're going to have to play as well as you can expect to and take your chances. I maybe wouldn't be surprised to see a wee bit of a shake-up. I wouldn't be surprised, for example, to see Wilson come back in for Stevenson, just to kind of give him that breather again. You're probably talking about maybe Rowe coming in from the start again, perhaps. I'm not quite sure if Fordyce is back in the mix, or if he's still a wee bit short yet. And then maybe we'll see the likes of one of Chin or Gibson kind of come into the mix. But yeah, truthfully, it's one of these ones. Fundamentally, if he played the same lineup as he did on Friday night, I don't think I'd be surprised. And if actually an hour before kick-off the tweet came out that there was 6 changes equally, I don't think I'd be surprised at that.
This is it. There are legitimate options in the bench. There's guys who haven't had enough minutes recently. So
yeah,
it'll be interesting just to see what he does, particularly in light of, we've drawn a couple of 0-0s in a row there, but then he's started 3 strikers on Friday night, and there's a lot of different ways he could go, I suppose, is probably what I'm trying to say there. So
yeah,
I'll be keen to see which angle he falls down on. Right, listen, I think we'll leave it there. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We will be back after that game on Wednesday night to plan our cup final outfits, or possibly have a big greet about how something awful happened and it all fell apart. But either way, you'll have to hear all about it. So thank you, as I say, for listening once again. We will be back, I would guess, Thursday night, but wait and see. Thank you. Goodbye.